Welcome to Quick and Qwinky, where we take your burning questions about kink, relationships, and everything in between and break them down into bite-sized answers. Let's dive in. A lot of people have this idea that a dom-sub relationship is just about power and control, but in reality, it's much more about communication, coming to the table together, and agreeing on what you want to achieve out of your dynamic. How do you want to move forward in it? What are the things that you're both interested in trying and exploring and incorporating into your dom-sub relationship? It's not just one person deciding this is how it's going to be and the other person being like, I'm going to do whatever you say. So let's set the record straight and talk about DS dynamics. So what makes a great DS relationship? Communication. It's so cliche, but good communication is what makes or breaks it. Okay, you could have 3 different dominant partners, okay, and they all have a different flair to how they dom, or you could have 3 different submissive partners and they're all going to have their own flair of how they're sub. Some could be like a good sub, others could be bratty. What you need is strong communication between you two so you can adjust on the fly. Like, pause for a second, be like, this isn't working for me. We need to figure out how to adjust this. Without that, you just have 2 people moving forward in a dynamic, maybe one or both of them being unhappy. So you need to be able to communicate. I think it's really important that both people are curious. In a kinky dynamic, you need curiosity. You need people asking questions like, how did that feel? What did you enjoy about that? What could be better? You need that type of curiosity so that you're both consistently improving and making the relationship stronger and better. Without that type of communication, you're not going to figure out ways to make it better. And I think this is rare, if not impossible. Your dynamic is not going to progress because you can't just be curious about your own interests and needs and wanting to explore those. You're in a partnership, a dynamic. That means you're in it with someone else, so you need to be understanding what's going through their head, how they're feeling, as well as how you are. So it's like just as important to be able to share how you're feeling and what you're interested in as it is to ask questions and get that information out of your partner. So when we talk about DS dynamics, technically you can be the dominant partner, the submissive partner, but then there are people out there who are also switches. They can easily flow into both. And they might lean more dom or more sub. So you could see like dom leaning switch or sub leaning switch written on some people's profiles. And there are kind of some easy ways to figure it out, but also just being in the lifestyle and exploring it help you figure out what you're into as well. So there's something called the BDSMtest.org, and you can go in there and answer a bunch of questions. And some of them are extreme, but that's because some people are into really extreme things. Just because you're not, those questions shouldn't scare you away. But you can get results on what percentage dom, subs, vanilla you are. And I think that's really good insight and a great place to start. So that's number 1. The other thing is just by being in a dynamic, you might feel certain ways over time, right? You might enter it as the submissive partner, and then you realize, ooh, my dom's a little bit bratty, and I have some stuff to say about that. And you know what? I would love to flip roles here with them right now. That might be an indicator you're a little bit of a switch. Sometimes personally, I get a little primal and I want to choke and slap. And even though I would say I'm a sub-leaning switch, there's definitely some switch in me too. One of the biggest misconceptions about the dom-sub dynamic is that people just enter into it and the amazing doms are born that way and amazing subs are just going to be completely subservient and anticipate needs better than anybody that they've ever met. Simply and sadly not true. As I said, it takes a lot of communication to get there. I mean, even if you find your perfect dom, there's still going to need some tweaks to be the perfect dom for you. Likewise, if you find the perfect sub, there's still going to need to be some tweaks for them to be the perfect sub for you. And I don't even believe in perfect. I just believe that 2 people can find each other and enter into a dynamic with the right level of flexibility and communication, and it can lead to something really great. It's super important to know and understand if you are experiencing a healthy power exchange or if you're with someone who just wants to either give up control completely or just take control completely, because it's a balancing act. Both people need to feel empowered in the dynamic, in the relationship, to express their needs, to be themselves, and to bring things up. Neither party should feel like they can't speak up. Neither party should feel like they are just there to play a role. One of the big red flags that it's really easy for me to start filtering people out is when I first start talking to them or we start discussing the dynamic If they throw out something like, I make the decisions now, you ask me, or when I'm talking to a sub, if they're like, I just want to give you all my money and I want you to take control. As nice as those things might sound in a fantasy world, in reality, that's just not going to work, right? You can't expect to come in and be able to take control or give control over without all of this communication. And at no point are you ever fully giving up control. There should always be the safe words and those little things in place to make sure you are empowered to stop things when you want. Before entering into a dom-sub relationship, you absolutely need to discuss what you both want out of said relationship. Like, go to your ideal end scenario and then figure out how to work back from there. So it's sort of like, okay, if we want something 24/7, I don't just say what I'm looking for is 24/7. I mean, I do. And then I start saying, that is what this looks like for me. This is what I'm imagining. This is how the day starts. This is how much communication is happening between us. What does that look like for you? Or what is your goal? Okay, so let's say we both start with our goals, the dom and the sub, and we sort of bring it together to talk about what the ideal situation or the ideal goal is. This is what we both want. Then we got to talk about what the specifics look like. I always recommend people write everything out because this is my silly example. I could say the word house. And yes, we could both think of an actual house and think of multiple variations. Is it like a shack or is it a mansion? But maybe someone's thinking Doctor House, the show, when they hear the word house. Two completely different things, same word, right? Write it out and describe it in great detail so you understand if you're on the same page as someone. That is why I created the communication workbook. For people who are trying to achieve this, it's a step-by-step guide to introduce what you're interested in. It helps you break it down into those like really granular pieces of information so that you can come together with your partner and go through what you're both expecting out of a scenario. You can find it in the show notes below. When I realize a dynamic isn't working for me, and sometimes it's because I've changed, sometimes it's my partner's changed, or the dynamic just isn't serving us the same way anymore, I kind of do a virtual timeout and I say, let's sit down and talk about what's going on. Sometimes I say, we need to take a break. We need to pause. No matter what dynamic you're in, you should always be able to take a pause on it because life happens and you need to reset. So what I'll say is, I need to take a break from this. I cannot be in the submissive role right now. I need to step out of it and readjust before I can step back into it. So I recommend calling a pause, talking to your partner. Maybe you're pausing because of the way they're behaving, or it's how you're feeling in the moment, but you need to have that conversation. The truth is, if you don't feel safe or comfortable having that conversation, I am questioning whether or not that relationship is healthy in the first place. A lot of people think if I'm going to be in a dom-sub relationship, it needs to be 24/7. It's all in or all out. People practice in so many different ways. You could even be in something considered a little bit extreme, like a master-slave relationship, and that master-slave relationship could just exist in the four walls of your bedroom on the first Saturday of the month, between the 8 hours of 8 and 10 p.m. It can be a super specific thing, or it can be more elaborate. It can be constant. I've been in a dynamic with someone where, I don't know, the communication wasn't always there of like, are we in it or are we not? But we could just flow in and out of it at any time. There might be a joke like, where was my yes, sir? And then I'm like, oh, we're playing right now. But there was a lot of looseness with that as well, where we weren't really structured. And if I was like, listen, I'm not feeling it right now, that was totally fine as well, So you can go from super loose to super strict. It is so customizable that there are no set rules. That's why this communication thing is really big, because the spectrum is huge. It's like really complex. There are so many options. So you need to be able to talk through it.
All right, Kinkster, let's talk about pleasure. Not just mine, yours too. If you're enjoying this episode of the Kink Consultant, I need you to do me a little favor, and I promise it'll feel oh so good. Take a second and give this podcast a 5-star rating. Just imagine your finger sliding all over that 5th star, pressing down, giving it exactly the kind of attention it deserves. Yeah, that's it. And you know what happens when you do? I get all hot and bothered knowing you're out there, showing your appreciation. Plus, every time you leave a review, a naughty little brat somewhere gets that spanking they've been begging for. So be a good listener and tap that star, won't you? Thanks, love. Now let's get back to the fun.
just in the bedroom dynamics, where as soon as like we kind of ended the scene, or as soon as someone orgasmed, or both people orgasmed, hopefully, it was over and everything was back to normal. You moved into the aftercare of like, oh, let's cuddle and talk about it. I've also had a much like more serious dynamic where from the moment we met to the moment we parted ways, we were in our roles. So when you're starting to have a dynamic or when you're starting discussions about what it is you want, one of the things you should discuss is how serious do we want to be about this? How intense do we want to be? And then once you decide that, scale it back from there too. You're dipping your toes in the water to see how this feels. You're introducing it slowly. I would never ever recommend you go from 0 to 100. You don't go from like, let's talk about this today and be in a 24/7 dynamic tomorrow. You're setting yourself up for failure. So what I'm going to suggest is you try maybe just doing it in the bedroom at first, in the evenings, starting at 6 p.m. Like time box it and say, let's try this. And then you stop and discuss. You know, you have a start time and an end time. Once the end time comes, check in with each other. Set a schedule of when your check-in's going to happen. Maybe it can't happen as soon as it ends. Maybe you want it to happen immediately after, in which case you tailor the amount of time you're going to spend in this session or in this practice versus how much time you're going to spend talking about it after. Then start incorporating the feedback into the practice. Then you might go for longer. You might go a whole day trying to incorporate the DS relationship or trying to live the DS relationship you want. Just be building on it and continue to talk to each other. That is why I made the Speak Your Desires with Confidence worksheet. It's like a template you can go back to over and over again to work through this process with your partner. Give feedback, take feedback, journal your thoughts about how you're feeling and how you want to build on your own dynamic. And have that at the ready for when you're ready to give and receive feedback. Got a question or something you want me to tackle in the next episode? Drop it in the comments. And until next time, keep on kinking on.